Yeah. So I just really wanted to ask you if you could just tell us a little bit. Well, tell us, how you found out that Daniel had been taken, and how things have been since then, and
So firstly, I'm a rabbi. Once I start speaking, it's hard to stop me.
Yeah, you can go speak as long as you want. That's fine. Yeah.
Luckily, I've got to go home. Otherwise, it'd be here for a while. But
Yeah.
so I think a few things. First, I'll tell you a little bit about our background and about our sons, and then a little bit, maybe some of my reflections, what I think as a rabbi and as a Jew about what's happening. So, firstly, we actually we've got 4 children. I'm sorry, we're not 9. We unfortunately,
more manageable.
We have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and we came here from South Africa in 2014, 9 years ago. We actually ended up making Aliyah, moving here in the middle of Operation Protective Edge. There was a war then. We seem to have a propensity for coming here in action times, but we came here in 2014. We moved to this place called Yad Binyamin, and we've been here for 9 years. It's like a religious community. Our boys were then 15 and 13, and our girls 10 and 6. So today our boys are 24 and 22. Jonathan, which is Jonathan in Hebrew, and Daniel. They both went to study in like what's called a yeshiva, religious studies. One for 1 year, one for 2 years. They both went to the army. They both continued in the army and are both officers in the Israeli army. Our oldest son, Jonathan, is what's called a company commander in the paratroopers. And our youngest son, Daniel, is an officer in the tank corps, as a commander of a tank. Unfortunately, they were both injured on October 7th on Simchat Torah. Our oldest son, Jonathan, thankfully, was moderately to lightly wounded, shot through the leg, and just by the grace of God, he could have been much worse, as many of his friends were badly injured and many killed, and a really big miracle. He left here at 8 o'clock in the morning. He was with us over the festival and the Shabbat, and he was here with his then fiancée, who's now his wife. They left. He left at 8 o'clock in the morning when he heard something was going on, and he fought for about 6 hours until he was in a battle with terrorists. He was shot, and thankfully through the leg. If he was shot a centimeter lower, it would have hit, God forbid, his main artery in the thigh, and if you don't put what's called a tourniquet on within 90 seconds in the right place, you can bleed to death, as some soldiers on the first day died of that. So we're very, very lucky that he missed everything, and thankfully he was able to come home. He was at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, and thankfully he recovered, got married 10 days later in the time that he was supposed to be married, which I'll maybe reflect on a bit. So we're very, very lucky with him. We haven't unfortunately been as lucky with Daniel. We hope and pray that we still will be. Daniel was positioned in a base in the south called Nachal Oz. It's also the name of a kibbutz in the south, but there's an army base on the border where he's been stationed for the last 5 months. And he was there for Shabbat with his tank crew. And we know that for a couple of hours he fought very gallantly. I don't want to say too much because he's in captivity, and I wouldn't want anything to get out about what did or didn't happen. But we do know that he really put his body on the line, and they really fought gallantly, saved a lot of people. And unfortunately, at around 9 o'clock in the morning, their tank was overrun, and one body was found in the tank, which is that of the loader. His name is Tomer Leibovitz. He from Tel Aviv. He was pronounced he was dead and buried soon thereafter. And Daniel, as the officer, and the other 2 soldiers were missing for 3 weeks, meaning that we didn't know. Meaning, when it happened, if I just take us back to the day, my oldest son, who ran out and fought, and we heard late in the afternoon he had been injured. He told us that he had fought in the same place where Daniel was based, and he noticed that Daniel's tank wasn't there, which he thought is a good sign because many people were killed in that base. It was overrun early on by Hamas, and thankfully we thought he's in his tank, he's okay. But by the end of the day, we started getting worried. At 12 hours, how long can you spend in the tank? We still thought it might be okay. By the next morning, we really were worried 24 hours later. The army only told us on Thursday, 5 days later, that him and the other 2 tank members were considered missing, which means that they don't know anything until today. things have changed, but they've got circumstantial evidence. But there's a Hebrew word which says nutak kesher, meaning that we've lost contact, and unfortunately it's 85 days we've lost contact with him still. We don't have any sign of life or anything. We don't know in what state. We know he was injured, as I'll speak about in a minute, but he was... so we heard on the Thursday from the army that Daniel and his other 2 members of the tank are missing. But already my son on Sunday was phoning around from his bed, just phoning here, phoning there, because he fought in the same area. And he eventually spoke to somebody. He eventually got hold of the right person who said to him that they saw the tank, and there's 1 body in the tank and 3 missing. And he asked if the body is that of the officer, and I said no. And he asked, what about the others? He said, they don't know. So we knew at that point that unfortunately, thankfully, he's not his body, but we knew that he's not safe, unfortunately. That was very, very hard moment just to hear that. My daughter says it's the first time she's seen me and my older son cry. I'm sitting sure I haven't cried other times, but that's just the first time she recalls seeing both of us cry. It was a very, very difficult moment as a family to come to terms with that. That is probably best case scenario with Hamas, hopefully alive. But and then about 2.5 weeks later, his definition was changed to taken, in all likelihood, taken hostage, based on cell phone, all types of different things. But the cell phone's not enough. That the cell phone's in Gaza doesn't mean the person's in Gaza. No. You know, it could have been stolen, and maybe the cell phones weren't with them, and because the rooms were ransacked. But there's enough circumstantial evidence to suggest that they're in Gaza. And unfortunately, about 3.5 weeks ago, we heard that he was also injured. There was quite a bit of blood in the tank, so they did a whole analysis and took DNA. And unfortunately, the blood is his blood, which means that thankfully it's not enough blood, as well as the contents of the blood, to change a definition. The still assumption is he's alive, please God, but we don't know what level of injury he had, and it's been really tough, really tough. I think since then it's been incredibly tough. You know, it's hard enough with him missing hostage, and I think, but the piece of the knowledge that, you know, we've seen hostages who've come out and they're okay, and so I think he's very, very strong emotionally and physically. But I think the knowledge that he was wounded, and we don't know to what extent he was wounded. I hope and pray that, you know, all 3 tank officers of the 3 tanks that there are hostages, all 3 officers are probably injured, all of them, because the officer's head is right by the top of the tank. So if you're going to come in from the top, you have to get through the officer. So we just hope and pray that if he was shot, it was just in his left arm and just a light wound. But we don't know. We don't know. So that's been particularly difficult. And there is one member of the tank, not my son. One of the hostages has seen him. One of the hostages who got out. So there's a sign of life as of about 2.5 weeks ago of one member of the tank that she said just before they gathered, you know, before they were freed, they brought hostages from different places in the tunnels, and she identified one of the hostages, but it's not our son. So regarding our son and one other soldier, we have we don't know if we hope and pray he's alive, but we don't know. Our assumption is he is, but we just don't know, you know, what level of injury he had. So that's been our 85 days. It's been quite a mixed bag, because on the one hand, we've got the story with Daniel, which is just, you know, very, very difficult. On the other hand, we do have a son who, God forbid, could have been killed and could have been very badly wounded. And not only did he, by the grace of God, he survived, he also managed to get married. We decided to go ahead with the wedding, together with him and his bride and her parents, even though Daniel wasn't there. Because, you know, you shouldn't push off a simcha, happy occasion. And how long are you going to wait? It's not like you put, how long, you know, a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year. They were a religious couple. How long do you push it off for? So we took the very difficult decision of having the wedding. We cancelled the wedding hall in Ashkelon. It was going to be a whole big wedding. We had a small one here in Yad Binyamin, but it was very special. Mm-hmm. Ladies put it together in 5 days, and it was a very, very special wedding. Yeah. And so we've had that on the one hand, and so it's been a bit of a mixed bag, and that's our reality. That's been our reality. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's overwhelming, even just to listen to. Mm. Yeah. Mm. I mean, how have you managed to have the strength to continue with the uncertainty?
I don't know. Meaning,
No.
I'll tell you what, one thing, I've learned a few things from this. Number one, I've learned that we're a lot stronger than we think we are.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of research which shows that human beings are a lot more resilient than we think we are. Meaning the anticipation of things is often worse than the thing itself. We don't think we'll be able to cope with things, and we are. There's a lot of research about that. And I think also the Jewish people, I think as a people, I think in the DNA of the Jewish people, there's an ability to withstand so much pain, challenge, and it's been the story of the Jewish people since time immemorial, and yet be able to, God tested Abraham 10 times, and each test was harder than the next, and each one didn't make sense. And how does the same God come to Abraham and say to him, promise him that his son Isaac will, the Jewish people will come from him, and then in the next breath say, just by the way, while he had it, just sacrifice him. Just say that again. And not only that, the same God who Abraham was drawn to because of morality is the same God that asks him to sacrifice his morality. How do you take the man that you chose because of his morality and ask him to sacrifice it for you? I'm Abraham, I've got all these questions and everything, and so many tests and challenges and suffering, yet I think in the DNA of the Jewish people is the ability to face challenges and overcome them. So I think for me, I feel very, very privileged to be part of a people who have faced so many challenges. In the weekly portion we're going to read this week, it's the servitude of Egypt, how Pharaoh forgets about being in the book of Exodus, forgets about everything Joseph did, and all of a sudden a couple of 100 years of terrible slavery. But there's an expression in Hebrew which says, avarnet paro, we got past Pharaoh, and if we can get past anything, And I do feel, for me, unfortunately, experiencing what we are, I do feel that the human spirit is just much, much stronger than we think. And I feel that the Jewish soul and Jewish collective experience, for me, gives me enormous strength because unfortunately so many people have suffered so much more than we have. It doesn't undermine what we're going through. But even just with the families, and with so many families have lost multiple family members, and some families have got multiple family members taken captive, and not to mention the 12 or 1300 which have been killed. And yet we have a son, thankfully, one who was saved, and one we hope we still have hope for. So as bad as it is, it's, you've got to decide. Maybe one thing which has given me a lot of strength is that there's a book, I'm sure you may have heard of it, it's called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. Have you heard of that book? Amazing, amazing book. He was a psychiatrist who interviewed thousands of people. I think it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's unbelievable. And M. Scott Peck. And in this book, I opened the book, I read the first paragraph, and I closed it, and I said, if I only read that paragraph, it was worth it. I've read more of the book, but in the opening paragraph, he says like this, he says, life is difficult. Life's very difficult. The problem is if we expect it to be different, it's much more difficult. If you just accept that life is challenging, it's actually not so difficult. I think the problem in life is difficult compared to what? I think each one of us has got a paradigm in our head. What do we compare life to? Firstly, comparisons are never healthy because it's all, why are you comparing?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, if we think that life is supposed to be easy, then every time it's difficult. But who said life is supposed to be easy? And I've come to realize in life just, so he says, what I got so much from this book, he said life is challenging, but if you accept it, it's actually not so difficult because now your paradigm is not expecting everything to be a walk in the park. Yeah. And I've come to realize in life expectations is just what is expectation? Why do we have expectations? Who said that you're supposed to expect things?
Mm-hmm.
I think we expect good health. Why we expect good? Why does God owe us something? Are we in His debt? That, So for me, I think that what I've come to realize in life is that life is what it is. It is what it is, and I think life is a lot more not only bearable. Life is beautiful, but it's got to be embraced on its own terms. I think sometimes we complicate life a lot by expecting things to be in a certain way, and when God doesn't fit into our expectations, we get upset and we've got all types of questions. And I think for me, being part of the Jewish people is just looking back at Jewish life, and just it's been incredibly challenging for the Jewish people, but incredibly rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And the other blessing for me to be part of the Jewish people is not to be a victim. I think victimhood is, it's the if I had to pick one quality and say it's the opposite of spirituality, right up there would be victimhood, because victimhood suggests that nothing we can do about it, and just the way it is, and fatalist, totally disempowering. Yeah. And Judaism is on the one hand incredibly embracing of God, and that things happen beyond our control, but at the same time understanding that we have to do everything in our power to shape, reality, and therefore I don't know why. Like, I'll say another thing that, like, I still am struggling to see myself speaking like this. Like, if you would have asked me before if this is how I thought I would have reacted, I wouldn't have thought so. Not that I thought about it, but I don't know where the strength is coming from. Obviously from God, from Hashem. I feel it's also coming from the human spirit, which Hashem has given us, I believe, Jewish collective experience and the Jewish soul. I also feel a lot of it's coming from the strength of the collective experience of the Jewish people. What I mean by that is, we're not alone in this. Unfortunately, it's a challenge that thousands of families are facing, and many have lost their dearest, and there's hundreds of hostages, and all of the Jewish people are together. And so I feel we're part of something on a certain level historic, meaning it's just something, I feel we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and I think there's a certain, not comfort, but there's something in that, a certain meaning that we're not alone. And I think also the fact that so many people have praying for Daniel and for all the hostages, and that we connected to so many people in Yad Binyamin in South Africa, all around the world, now in Scotland. In Scotland. Absolutely. And I think that all around the world, you thought, not coming here for free, I'm going to start praying, relying on your prayers.
Absolutely.
Okay. But I think that seeing that all around the world, I think, is very, very encouraging, and people doing good deeds in His name. And so I don't feel alone. I think one of the things I felt very profound is I don't know how people get through such difficulties if they're alone. Because some people have real challenges where it's just they're alone in it. It's sicknesses, it's not part. There's nothing. I'm not sure what they anchor it in other than in faith. Here I feel, for me, this is anchored in faith in God. It's anchored in the human spirit for me. It's anchored in the Jewish experience. It's anchored in this particular Jewish experience, which has got so many people going through so much difficulty, as well as so many people praying and doing good deeds for our son. So I don't feel alone. We don't feel alone. I'm also blessed to be very, very, very Zionistic. If the centrality of Israel and its meaning in Jewish destiny wasn't so core in my being, I think I'd find it harder. So somehow it also connects on a deep level, as hard as it is with who I am, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. It's harder for my wife. My wife firstly gave birth to Danielle, and I say it's different because I've never thought about what Daniel wears and what he's eating. He's okay, We guys, My wife always is concerned in the army, like, what is he eating? Is he sleeping? What is he, He likes the finer things in life, Danielle, and she was, So I think just that's already on her head, which I sort of, number one. Number two, I'm like the Meshuggah. You know the word Meshuggah? I'm the crazy Zionist in the family. My wife's also deeply connected to Israel, but not in the same way that I am. I play a leadership role in a religious Zionist organization. So there's also that element. She's a mother who's, struggling with her son, who is, let's say, less crazy Zionist than I am, and also who's less of a public figure. So I'm also dealing, like, my wife hasn't done things like this. She's got a very, very close friend, and she's dealing with it in her way. In a different way, and I'm dealing with it in my way. So obviously this is hard for me to speak, and a bit draining, but at the same time, it gives me strength, and I'm hopefully giving others strength. So I think I feel, for me, I've got these sort of outlets or anchors, which I think for me, have given me the strength. And if I know how hard it is for me, I can't begin to imagine how hard it is for my wife. I mean, I live with her, but I can see it, but it's very challenging. But she's very, very strong, and she's amazing. And one of the big things I've tried very, very hard, I think I'm very lucky also that my wife and I made the decision to move to Israel together without any daylight between us, because I think had one pushed the other one on any level, I think it would be much, much harder.
Yeah.
Luckily, we 100% together in it, so it's brought us closer, not more apart. And secondly, because we're both dealing with this in our own way, it's very important that we remain close and not that we don't drift in each one. So we work very, very hard at that. And I almost think, we've married for 25 years. It's almost like 25 years of marriage and 15 years as a community rabbi has, unfortunately, prepared us for this, if you know. Because it's the type of thing that I think it can tear families apart as well. So I'll say maybe one other point, and that is that I think in life, another thing I've learned is like when you look from the outside into an experience, it's not the same as experiencing it. Somebody said to me that when I spoke a few weeks ago somewhere, they said to me that their mother said to them that if, God forbid, the same thing had happened to them, she would never be able to go ahead with his wedding without the brother there. And I said to them first, please God, you'll never go through something like this, but I will say to you, you never know, because you look at something from the outside and you project what you're feeling. Yeah. But there's certain experiences that, and I've seen this, you can't fathom how you experience it until you, God forbid, experience it. And therefore, it's very difficult. I don't know why I'm calm. I don't know why I am. I'm not the calmest person who's ever walked the earth, I don't know why I'm reacting the way that I am. And I don't take it for granted, you know what I mean? We're 85 days into it. People have lived with this for years. I was with a man called Simcha Golden, whose son was killed, but haven't had the body back in 9.5 years, and it's hard to. So just for me it's day by day, but I think for me I'll say maybe one other thing. There's a great sage in the Talmud called Rabbi Akiva, a great sage, and he was famous for saying that everything that God does, He does for the best. And I don't know if I can say no matter what happens it's for the best. I can say that here. I'm not sure if I can say it in my head, but I'll tell you what I can say here, that whatever happens, it's going to be okay. Whatever happens, it'll be okay. And I think for me, the thing that's given me a lot of strength this period is a thought that I've had for many years, but it's, now, I feel like I have to live by it, and that is, we have to make a decision in whose world we live. Do we live in our world or in God's world? Mm-hmm. If we live in our world, as there's a famous, German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, he famously said, he was a very deep pessimist. And he asked why. He said, there's nothing in science or rational thinking that says things will get better. It's a belief. Who said it's right? Is the cup half empty or half full? It's both, obviously. And is there anything in life to suggest that things will be good or bad? There's nothing in rational scientific thinking. And all of our attitude to life and our view of life really is a question of faith and perspective and everything. And I think for me, if we live in our world, then it's a world of, science, it's a world of rationality, and therefore it's 50-50. Maybe there's a God, maybe there isn't, maybe things will be good, maybe they won't, maybe there's meaning, maybe there isn't. And in that world, I don't know if things are bearable and doable, and, the best, Arthur Schopenhauer said, is that you can make life bearable. You can't live a happy life. There's no such thing as true happiness. You can live life in a bearable way. I think nothing could be further from the truth of how the Jewish view is. If I had to pick another word, the word to me that I think is the exact opposite of what Judaism's about, it's the word despair, Yeush in Hebrew. Jewish life is full of darkness and difficulty and challenge and pain and suffering, but it's never despairing. It's never ever despairing. And I think the existence of the Jewish people, and not only the surviving and the thriving of the Jewish people against the odds, is the testament that life is good, and life is not only bearable, but life is enjoyable, and we can overcome whatever challenges we have. And therefore, in God's world, the world is full of goodness, it's full of hope. Good will triumph over evil, and happiness is more prevalent than other things, and gratitude more prevalent than what's lacking. And so for me, I think we have to make a decision every day to choose which world we live in.
Yeah.
And whenever I get a little bit fearful and think of the future, I just firstly grab myself and say, I also think it's wrong. Dale Carnegie. Heard of Dale Carnegie, yeah?
No.
No. Dale Carnegie was this famous, he's not a rabbi. Dale Carnegie was this famous self-help thinker, I think, in America. I wonder if he was Scottish. Is Carnegie a Scottish name?
Carnegie, yeah. He had all the Carnegie
Teach me
halls.
about your ancestors. But about, so he's a very, very famous self-help person, Dale Carnegie. And he's written a number of books. One famous book of his is called How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes, I've heard of that book.
And he wrote another book called Don't Worry. It's a whole thing about worry. And he says there in his introduction to the book, he says, 50% of things we worry about never happen.
Yeah.
50. So he said it's irrational to worry, firstly, because 50% never happen. And the other 50%, how does worrying help? Worrying can help if it brings you to action or whatever. So another insight I've come to sort of, try and live by is that if you live with worry, it means you're living with a concern about the future. But none of us control the future. That's God's world.
Uh-huh.
And you're overstepping your jurisdiction into a world that you've got no control over. That's overstepping your mark. In the world that we live in, right here, as I said, we've got to just choose if we live in God's world or our world, but the world of God that we live in is a world where the only control we have is of the present and the decisions we make. What will be, we've got to do everything in our power to influence what will be, but ultimately what will be is only God knows. No human being knows what's going to be in any area of human endeavor in one moment's time. And therefore, I've also come to, I'm trying in a short amount of time to give you the whole everything.
You're doing very well.
So I have to end soon. Yeah. But just to say that I think that one has to live, for me, I've tried to just take it one day at a time, because that's what we have, is this one day.
Yeah.
And I think if you step over into a world that we've got no influence and control in, then it's a world of worry and it's a world of concern. And I think all these things are not, we all know these things. There's no big rocket science here. But I think for me, I feel that if I don't live by them, then it's very difficult to live and function. And therefore, sometimes in life, you have to live by things that we all know. Somebody said, there was a great rabbi, Chafetz Chaim, who said, life is actually not that complicated. It's just that people are complicated and we're complicated. We trip over ourselves. I think we all know that we should eat healthily and we should have healthy relationships and we should live with discipline and with value. I think we all know what we're supposed to do, but how do you take something from here, from rational to how it should be? And in that gap is where life is lived. And I think that when you go through something like this, which really strains your life, you have to every day choose the best possible modus operandi. Otherwise, it's so when I do feel a little bit fearful, when I'm seeing so many people in our community in South Africa who went through suffering and loss and everything, many of them said, and I learned a lot from it, they said, the only way they can get through it is like one moment at a time, one day at a time. So many people said that. And I know in the moment I start projecting or to stop myself and say, there's a choice. There's a choice whether you're going to live in fear or you're going to just live in the main. It's hard. And the second and final thing maybe I'll say is that where there was a child who was murdered, 2 children in a cave 22 years ago. Mandel. So I remember because I spoke about it at our son Daniel's bris, his 22-year-old, and his circumcision. They had just found the 2 bodies. We were in South Africa and I spoke about this. Was Yosef Ishran and
Kobe
Mendel, yeah. Very good. Have you interviewed Sherry Mendel?
No? Not yet.
Okay.
I've been in touch with her, but not yet.
So in the book she wrote called The Blessing of a Broken Heart.
I read it.
It's unbelievable. A few friends of mine said to me, lost it. They said, you should, as a rabbi, you should read it. And one of the things that really struck me about that book was how she speaks about, just all of a sudden there's this unexpected rush of pain and tears. And she said, don't fight it, just... Her kids would joke with her, say, okay, Mom, you've got a few minutes, just, she'll see a pair of shoes or something. And and it's like a wave. I've come to see that when you have that pain, just let it flow. It's like a wave. Wave, and actually the Torah in Psalms are called mishparim thing, breakers. Because I think they break eventually, no matter how strong they are, they eventually break. And I think when a wave comes, it's hard to fight it. You just got to go with it. But it ends, it passes, and it flows through and it passes. And I think the good news is, as I'll come back to where I started, I think we're a lot stronger than we think we are. And I think that Jewish experiences taught me that life is a package deal. And we are, if anything, the Jewish life has taught us, no matter how challenging it gets, we can overcome, and we do overcome. In fact, even the name Israel, with Jacob's name, to struggle with God and to overcome. And interesting, the name is not, if it was who had overcome, it would have been in Hebrew Sarel.
Okay.
But it's not Sarel, it's Yisrael. Meaning God's name is not, even though it says because you struggled with God and human and you overcome, his name should have been Sarel, the one who struggled, but it's Yisrael, the one who will struggle. I think it's implying that it's putting in the DNA of the Jewish people that there will always be challenges, and you'll always have to face your demons, and there'll always be challenges, and there'll always be the Esau's of the world and the Lavans and people who are trying to, in every generation, unfortunately, as we say in the Pesach Haggadah, trying to uproot, yet V'hishamda, we're able to overcome it as we have, and I think we will get through this.
Yes.
And I really have to run, but I'll say one last thing. I'll say that is that I think that Hamas and Hassan Nasrallah, the big enemies of Israel, who Nasrallah is a big mastermind, and he's often said, he's got a famous theory where he says that Israel is just one big spider web. It's a cobweb. It's just, if you put enough pressure on it, Israeli society will fold and the Jews are weak. And he's got his whole cobweb theory. And I think he made a very, very, very big mistake. I think he interpreted all the arguments politically over the last year and all the elections and all the major challenges in Israel as a weakness, and it is a weakness. But he thought that Israel will fold, and all he's done, he's brought 300,000 Israelis back to Israel. He's reunited the Jewish people after a time of such divisiveness, and I think he has strengthened the fabric of Israeli society and Jewish society with all the, and he's injured us, and we're limping, and he's hurt us, and he's hurt our family, and he's hurt many other families, and on a daily basis causing a lot of pain and destruction. But I think he ultimately has strengthened us and strengthened our resolve and reminded us of who we are and how we ultimately, I think the Jewish people are a force of, if I had to summarize this battle, it's those who celebrate life against those who celebrate death.
Yeah.
Those who, through their death, through hatred and death, cause destruction, and those through love and personal responsibility embrace life. And I think ultimately life is stronger than death, and light is stronger than darkness. And our name is Israel. We will overcome, and we will. And we hope and pray. If I can ask you if you could pray for our son.
Absolutely.
His name is Daniel Shimon. Maybe I'll send it. Daniel Shimon ben Sharon. My wife's name is Shelley. Everyone's calling her Sharon because her Hebrew name is Sharon. If you can pray for him, we'd appreciate it. To know that people in Scotland, high up north there by Aberdeen, praying for him.
We will. Yeah, we personally will, and will encourage everybody that we know.
We're counting on it. We're counting on your prayers.
Well, okay. Absolutely, we'll pray.
Do you want to ask anything? One final thing, and then I'm going to run.
I'm actually speechless. I think that everything you've said is really touched me very deeply, and I understand what you're saying, and we will pray.
Thank you.
We will definitely pray.
Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for sharing our message, and thank you for...
Is there anything you would like us to do, anything more than pray?
Prayer is one, and I think just to share, I think we live in a world of such moral obscurity, and it's just madness that we live in a world that the people who were attacked over here, and this is a blatant attack which denies the Jewish people any right to sovereignty anywhere in the land, and with such murder and pillaging and raping, just the most horrific and burning. Yeah. And I just think just the ability to just, unfortunately, there's one philosopher who said the problem with common sense is it's not so common, and the people are just too articulate. When we saw these 3 presidents of these universities who couldn't say what a 3-year-old should be able to say, I know. Just frightening. Just frightening that people can have such lack of, they become so clever that they're so stupid, and you just can't say clear
what
things.
They know is clearly.
Yeah, and I just think in a world of lacks moral clarity, I just think is just to try and articulate truths, even if they're not so popular, but just to articulate them and to share them. And I think, I think that's really important.